Thanks. All right, so back to the dumbest idea. So let me share one of my dumb ideas, probably my dumbest idea. So when we were kids, a friend of mine's dad had would hunt, so he had a muzzle loader, and we should take some black powder, and if you take a little bit of it and you light it, and it creates this little puff of white smoke, and we thought that was pretty cool, and we thought, well, you know, if we had more of this and it'd make a bigger puff of smoke, then that would be even cooler. So my friend Scott goes back to his house, and he gets a lunch bag, and he fills it with black powder. So this is going to be really cool, right? So we take this bag, barely be able to fold the top, and when we lay it down on the street, and the three of us are standing over it with lighters trying to light this. Okay, so, and it lit. And there was this guy that lived 3 blocks away. When he heard the explosion, came out of his house, and he saw this huge mushroom cloud. It reminded him of this atomic bomb explosion, right? And yeah, and so there were 3 of us. Ronnie, he got a little burn on his arm. Me, I got like 1st-degree burns, like a real bad sunburn. I had burned off all the my eyelashes and eyebrows, and that wasn't the first time I'd done that either. And I had burned the freckles off my face, so if you ever want to know how that's done. And but Scott, the first time I got to see him after that, his face was a complete scab. His eyes were scabbed over his whole face. It was the grossest thing I've seen in person. And it was it was really a dumb idea. So take a few minutes and talk about it at your table. What's the dumbest idea you've ever had?
I feel like a loser.
Another one of mine was there's this big field out behind my house, and it was middle of July, and it's hot and it's dry, and the weeds are 6 feet tall, and the wind's blowing, and decided to go out and build this little fire. And 30 minutes later, the fire trucks are coming and all that stuff, and it's heading for the woods and to this other development, and yeah. And then there was the time decided to take an inflatable canoe down this creek right after a hurricane. And the water's, I mean, it really flows. And do you know, they're not as stable as you would imagine, but when that thing flips over and that water is pulling you down, it kind of holds you underneath there. And so part of me is just like really happy to be here to be able to talk at all. So it's a wonder we get through. Hey, let me, just a side note real quick, I was sharing this with a friend of mine. He said when he was a kid, he had a friend of his tell him, if you pour a ring of gas around you and light it, as long as you stay inside, you won't get burned. So as he started to do this, right, his dad came out and stopped him. But man, oh man, that's incredible. Well, you know, I've noticed in my life that I've made a lot of bad decisions, and with it come a lot of bad consequences. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 7, it says, do not be deceived, God cannot be mocked. We reap what we sow. See, some of the other bad decisions I made a couple years from the time I just shared with you, got introduced to drugs, and you know, it was a decision I made at about age 14 or 15, and you know, this is the mid-70s, and everything's out there. You know, we got pot and hash and angel dust, PCP, LSD, cocaine. I mean, you name it. You know, it was just, it was everywhere. It was all the time. So for about the next 15 years, that's the direction my life took. My drugs of choice or preference were pot and cocaine, and then on any given time, you know, throw in a mix of anything else that was around. And I remember as a kid, you know, starting on Saturdays and just somebody had some dope and they brought it and we'd get high, and then that was so much fun, it ran into Sundays. And then we couldn't wait for the weekend, so we started partying Fridays, and then Fridays didn't come soon enough. So we started partying on Thursday. And then there came a time, and the only time I wasn't getting high is if I didn't have the money or I couldn't find somebody that had something. And this went on for a long time. And it cost me. It cost me tens of thousands of dollars. I don't even know that I really want to calculate the amount of money that I spent. It cost me jobs. I remember the first job I had at a gas station. The boss really liked me, kind of moved up quick in a gas station, right? But to shift manager, and then, then the drug scene started coming into my work. Taking bong hits at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I kind of lost interest, and my boss kind of lost interest in the way I was working, and he fired me. Fast forward about 6 more years, got a job at a company called NCR. I had to wear a suit and tie and everything, and this was the height of my cocaine use. And I don't know what the statutes of limitations are and whether we got to edit this or not, but I worked a lot in government buildings. And I don't know that there was a government building that I entered that I didn't find some place to duck in somewhere to do a line. And these places had security, they had government personnel, they had military personnel, they had cameras around. But I was so interested in getting high, I didn't even take these things into consideration. I didn't consider that my pupils were so big that you probably couldn't even see the color of my eyes. I didn't consider what they knew about drugs. I didn't consider if they just thought I had allergies or a cold every time I was in their building. Cost me real friendships. There's a whole different set of rules for friendships when you're getting high. It's about arguing and fighting. And man, if you're jonesing and looking for a score, then it's backstabbing and stealing. It cost me my integrity. I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the contract had run out, so the rental car was now gone. Money, I had no more money coming in, and I would walk down the streets of Ann Arbor and collect aluminum cans. So they had a 5-cent deposit on them, and I knew if I got about 60 of them, I could get a 6-pack. Got 100 or more, maybe a 12-pack, take them back to the apartment. Didn't really have enough to share, wasn't sure when the next time would be. And I hear my next door neighbor leave and wait a few minutes and break into his apartment. He had a window that wouldn't lock, and I'd go in there and look for a stash of coke. It cost me my emotional growth. Because in my 30s now, I had a mentality of this kid who started getting high at 15 with all the anger and the selfishness and the irresponsibility and all that as a kid that I never learned because I was so high all the time that nothing ever changed with me emotionally. Now skip a few more years. Okay, and here's, let me see, from Ann Arbor, Michigan, I know what it was. I got a call from my mom. She said the hospital called, said my dad didn't have much longer to live. So I got this $500 car, put everything that belonged to me, which was clothes, and I took off, and I got back to Maryland a day after he died. A couple years after that, decided to get married. And within 2 years, we had 3 kids. Bought a house that we couldn't afford. As a matter of fact, I've done that 3 times, and I've lost 2 of them. Living a lifestyle that I could not maintain. Started racking up the debt on the credit cards, and had to get another credit card. Cashed in a 401k to try to make ends meet. And my bills were always late, and there was always a late fee. More bad advice from a guy who said he could help me get out of this mess. Then after the creditors stopped calling, their legal department did. They were telling me how many thousands of dollars that I needed to pay them just to get on a payment schedule, to pay back what I owed. And eventually, I got so far in a corner and so lost and so deep that I filed for bankruptcy. I just saw no other way out of this. And, I could go on all night telling you about the decisions I made about college and career and my marriage and my kids. You guys relate to what I'm saying? Have you made any bad decisions? Are you suffering the bad consequences? I mean, that's a rhetorical question. I know you have. I know I have. I know some of you guys. I know your stories. I also know what God says. Early in Genesis, in chapter 6, he says, the intention of man's heart is evil all the time. In Romans, Paul says, no one is righteous. No, not one. So what do we do with that? How do we get out of making these bad decisions? How do we get out of this mess that we find ourselves? What do we do to start making right decisions so there are right consequences? God's Word shares with us what we can do. It's in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. And it says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and forgive their sins and will heal their land. So how can we apply this to our lives? Well, give me a couple minutes here to break this down. It says, if my people are called by my name. So the first thing we need to do is we need to belong to God. We need to be one of His people. There has to be a point in time where we have driven that stake in the ground and surrendered our lives to Jesus Christ. And for some of you guys here, that might be where you're at. That's the first thing that you need to do. Step number 1 is come to that place. And it says we must humble ourselves. So what does that look like? We need to admit that we make bad decisions. We need to admit that we make mistakes. And we need to take responsibilities for the consequences we're living in. We can't blame other people for the choices that we make. Okay? We can't blame our boss, our wives, our kids, our neighbors. We can't blame the government. We made those choices. In all the stupid things I've ever done, nobody has ever held a gun to my head. Well, there's this kid when I was 6, but I don't think the gun was real. But anyway, I made these bad choices in my life. And pray. We need to be on our knees. Man, I still have pillows on the side of my bed that I use to get down on my knees to pray to my God, because I need to pray for forgiveness. I need to pray for His presence. I need to pray for His help. I need to pray for God to intercede and interrupt my life. I need to seek my face. What's that look like? Right here is God's Word. Everything He wanted us to know, He wrote down in here. You want to seek God's face? Read these words. Listen to what He says about you. Listen to what He says about Himself and the character of God. You need to seek His face in community. In this place right here.